Hi, thank you for joining us for this program. My name is Rose, and I'm a librarian and archivist in the Digitization and Special Collections Department at the library. On behalf of the Los Angeles Public Library, I'm pleased to introduce this program, Heavy Lifting, Rising from the Ashes, with Felicia Rice and Theresa Whitehill on the topic of collaboration and the artist's book. The program is part of a year-long initiative called Looking at Art, the Book, Celebrating Artists' Books. Thank you both so much for joining us. The limited edition artist book, Heavy Lifting, a recent addition to special collections, is the outcome of a close collaboration between artist and printer Felicia Rice of Moving Parts Press and poet Theresa Whitehill that took place over 4 years and speaks to personal and collective experiences of loss and hope. The things that drew me to the book initially were the use of original poetry, its timeliness, the quality of the imagery and craftsmanship, and the ability to display the book easily. The book complements other aspects of special collections, including the Los Angeles COVID-19 Community Archive, and also speaks to the devastating 1986 fire at Central Library and reconstruction. I was lucky enough to have a chance to meet Felicia and Theresa at the Codex Foundation Book Fair and Symposium in February in Oakland, and to see others interact with the book. And now I'd like to introduce Felicia Rice.
Thank you, Rose, for inviting us to participate in your series, which is really a wonderful contribution to the world of the book and the book arts. Those of us who make books out here in the world, and for myself, it's been 45 years as a letterpress printer and limited edition artist book fine press bookmaker. I have a little statement that I make commonly about myself regularly. Let me go ahead and read it. As a printer, my job is to confront complex issues and render my response to them in book form. As an artist, my job is to do so with profound integrity. As a publisher, my job is to make these issues public. As printers have done every decade since Gutenberg, I'm here to argue for a more just society. And I founded Moving Parts Press in 1977 in a garage in downtown Santa Cruz. My husband, Jim Schoonover, and I raised our 2 sons in Santa Cruz, living the last 25 years in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We had no plans to leave our community of neighbors and friends of 45 years. But a fire hit 4 years ago. At the time, I was in Mendocino preparing my family home for a new tenant, and Jim was doing some packing, planning to join me the next day. At 11:30 the night of August 20, 2020, our neighbor, a retired firefighter, called Jim and said, get out now, the fire is coming." He grabbed the to-go box of important papers and drove up the coast through Dante's Inferno to arrive in Mendocino at 5:30 in the morning. By 11 o'clock that morning, we knew our rented home on Empire Grade had burned to the ground with all of our belongings, including my entire letterpress print shop of 43 years and my complete inventory of artist books. As renters, we were able to pull up stakes just like that and begin the task of creating a new household in the Rice family home in Mendocino and establishing ourselves in a new town. It was this community and that of colleagues from across the country, over 800 individuals, organizations, and institutions, that immediately began donating to my rising from the ashes with the rebuilding of Moving Parts Press in a new home, a new building, new equipment, and the funds to create new work, the artist's book, Heavy Lifting. As Rose said, the Heavy Lifting project is the outcome of a 4-year collaboration between myself and poet Theresa Whitehill. And with the addition of the listening tour that we have been doing for 18 months, it is also a 5-year plus collaboration. And it had begun in the fall of 2019, and the fire hit the following August. So this is a story of loss and recovery from the fire in 2020. And it is much more than that. This project is a response to my personal, but also our collective crises during the pandemic of loss and renewal, crisis, and recovery. It suggests a path forward and opening to the possibilities of the future. So this afternoon, we'll introduce you to Heavy Lifting, an artist's book of 60 copies. Its companion book of the full suite of poems written by my collaborator, Theresa Whitehill, during this time, and the film on heavy lifting, which we're about to show you. Something about the listening tour. This is the 13th stop on our listening tour. Again, Theresa Whitehill, who you'll meet soon, and I have been traveling around Northern California, Santa Cruz, as far north as Seattle, listening, talking about our project, as you'll hear today, and listening to what others have to say about their experiences of fire and other crises in our lives. The idea of the tour grew out of the simple fact that Mendocino County, where I now live in Northern California, is 3 times the size of Rhode Island, with a population just over 90,000 and 5 population centers in various parts of a county that folds down the middle with a line of mountains. So the only way to reach our local audience was to take the book to them. And so 5 stops quickly grew, though, into 13 around Northern California and as far north as Seattle. And each event has its own character, and we've learned something new. Our first gathering was at the heart of the Jewish community in Casper at the Casper Shul on a very rainy day in March of 2023. Processing grief through poetry and story with tears and laughter became the theme of that afternoon. And we went on to the Point Arena Library, to the Willits Community Center, to the Schoolhouse Museum in Lower Lake. We met at the Pacific Textile Arts in the morning. We've done this in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon, with groups of people, which I had always thought might be as few as 5, would just sit in a circle and really talk about our issues one-on-one. But they tended to grow into proscenium. We're in front and there's an audience arrayed before us. It's very hard to, break down the fourth wall. And typically, we have had as many as 50 people, but never the 5 that I thought of, 15 to 50 people. In September of 2023, we were in Berkeley at the Codex Book Arts Foundation, and then later at the Cascadia Poetry Festival in Seattle, North Bay Letterpress Arts in Sebastopol, UC Santa Cruz's Institute for the Arts and Sciences. And last month, we were in the Santa Cruz Mountains at the beautiful Felton Public Library to mark August 20, 2020. It was the 4th anniversary of the CZU Lightning Complex fire. And we invited the audience to talk about their experiences. And amazingly, KSBW Channel 8, the Salinas TV station, produced a story that aired that night at 11 o'clock. And you can watch it online now. It came out beautifully, very short. So today we're zooming with the Los Angeles Public Library, and we're very pleased that a recording of this event will be available online as a touch point for fewer viewers, because finally, next month in October, we'll close the tour in Chico, California. It will resolve our tour 6 years after the Camp Fire in nearby Paradise, California, took the lives of 85 people. And this fire opened my eyes to the ravages of wildfire in our state. So it's very fitting for me, for us to close there. And I'm intimidated because those people really have experienced the ravages of fire and also repeated threats. This year was terrible in that area, Butte County, Shasta County, Tehama County, I believe. It has been a very tough year also in Southern California. We know up here, we hear about the fires you're experiencing, and our hearts go out to all those impacted. Over the last 18 months, we have learned that the impact need not be the loss of a home or a loved one. Every community member is called upon to accommodate the crisis and contribute to the renewal of our huge state. So I look forward to what we conjure up this afternoon. You will be listening to us, and we hope to be listening to you. Everything about the fire is still right on the surface with this 4th anniversary, which is also the 1st anniversary of the Maui fires. And we are not alone, as I've said, in undergoing life-shattering and life-altering experiences. The heat and fires raging across the state bring a sense of foreboding. Will it happen again today? Does having experience with wildfire make us more prepared? Marking the complexity of this feeling seems the best way to commemorate this anniversary. We hope to hear all of this and more from you who have chosen to join Theresa and I today. I've been seeking stability through the reconstruction of my home and my workplace. I've begun exploring new beginnings in my work, and I treasure those times when I am able to set the crises to the side, at least some of it, and celebrate our resilience. But the times remain extremely unstable, and I'm asking, what would a stable world look like, and what sacrifices must be made to create a stable future for future generations? I'm going to show the film on heavy lifting that I created to extend the reach, but also the message of the book, artist book, Heavy Lifting. I've been augmenting my printed artist books with another form of media, electronic media, for 10 years now. Several editions have had electronic case with sound and lights, audio recording, video. So this is my first film though. This is my first attempt. So here's a little explanation of what you're about to see. So this book, Heavy Lifting, it has 2 accordion fold panels, which you may have noticed in those earlier slides. They nest into one another. But in making this 2 accordions that nest together and then fold down into a traditional Western codex and can be opened as one, stood up as a sculptural installation, and separated, I began to see them as a 9-foot-tall architectural installation, large enough to walk through. You'd walk by these huge birds and turn around, and there'd be poetry on the wall behind you, a permanent installation in a sculpture park. But short of that, I thought perhaps an immersive performance of projected images and text from the book that the audience could walk through with surround sound. So these would be a series of performances. Little too much of a lift. So short of that, a film of a one-time performance. The film idea merged with instructive videos common in the artist book world on how to navigate a complex book structure. And this merged with telling how the book developed in the theater of my mind, late night sessions, imagining what this book would look like and how it were a murky and sometimes confusing place. My father, Ray Rice, made independent animated films in the 60s and 70s that illustrated this internal space, I think, and this space is dedicated to his memory. His grandson, Will Rice, is a Santa Cruz native who grew up in Bonnie Doon. He is a composer and multi-instrumentalist based in Oakland, and he contributed the sound for the film. Super interesting recordings of readings and layering of sound to mirror the layering of imagery in the book. My husband, Jim Schoonover, lent his voice and video expertise to the making of the film. He has been an invaluable partner on our tour, providing transportation and companionship, running the film under every possible condition, and creating video documentation of almost every event. And my niece, Yana Porter, added footage as well, so this is truly a family affair. I would like to just quick acknowledgement of those names I just mentioned. Others who contributed their voices: Paulo Ferreira, Sydney Regelbrugge, Georgina Marie Guardado. Frey Barty did the footage along with Jim Schoonover, Arlo Reeves, and myself. I can't stop this introduction early because I have to acknowledge the dancer, Kara Starkweather of the Mendocino Dance Project, who made this film what it is. And the editing was amazing. Young woman, Elena Newton, at the time a UCSC film student, who met weekly with me online for 2 months using Frame.io to co-edit the film. I didn't meet face-to-face with her until a year after the film was done. And so, again, let me thank the Los Angeles Public Library for so generously hosting us this afternoon, and let's watch this film on heavy lifting.
The thermals slow. Winds rake across the headlands and disrupt the skies, sucking breath from our noses and mouths. Vultures, gulls, ravens hang in the sky, riding the thermals, slowly cycling, beaks cocked until wide wings suddenly tip. In the upwelling of air where sea and cliff face meet, healthcare and housing, crises of immigration, racism, politics, prisons, plundering communities, ravaging our lives. Whitecaps rise and stagger across the impassive plain of the sea. I lean out in free fall, then pump my strange new wings.
Butch lightning, Lost Pipe lightning, Jack Smith lightning, Albion River lightning, Horse lightning, Ore Series lightning, Montgomery Flat lightning, Alder Creek lightning, Wagers lightning, Mendocino lightning complex fire, Summer Solstice 2008, Summit Fire, Santa Cruz Mountains, May 2008. Rocky Fire, Jerusalem Fire, Valley Fire, Lake and Napa Counties, September 2015. Redwood Valley Complex Fire, Cherokee Fire, Tubbs Fire, Atlas Fire, Nuns Fire, Northern California Firestorm, October 2017. Ranch Fire, River Fire, Pawnee Fire, Mendocino Complex Fire, July 2018. Camp Fire, The Lost of Paradise, Northern California, November 2018. Kincaid Fire, Sonoma County, October 2019. CZU Lightning Complex Fire, Santa Cruz Mountains, August 2020. Glass Fire, Napa, Sonoma, and Solano Counties, September 2020.
Heavy lifting. This is the pause I am flying in, flying hard so as not to fall to earth. Apparently, grief is not a calm, but a huge effort. Letter from a friend. Heavy lifting. It's hard to convey the crisis that happened to us back in the early 21st century. The multiple crises, the concatenation of disasters, the wounding, the beginning of the ending of the wounding, the unraveling of all that had gone before. That we were already carrying the burden of the dying off of the polar bears and the failing of the glaciers, that was hard enough. But it was when the birds began to fall out of the sky, emaciated, desperate, if not already dead, that we realized. We were no longer living in the time of prophecy, no longer in the theory of it all. It was unfolding all around us, one heart stop after another, a chain reaction of seemingly helpless events. We had poisoned the well, and just because we couldn't conceive of it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just means that we couldn't conceive of it. Because the evidence, there it was, looking up. From this time, we date a different life. The stories we told our children changed at this time. Our dreams changed. Some of us stopped dreaming. Others registered guns or took part in compromised immune systems. And out of this arose a powerful and dangerous tendency, a hiccup in history, a scratch in the record's fine vinyl grooves that caused it to skip and repeat unerringly, so that while some of us were remembering, were touching our faces to the glass, others were forgetting, or not so much forgetting as to never have been taken in those events that were more than consciousness could bear. We lived in that nervous slice between forgetting and the inevitable. This was the place we were brought to, where we could stand and look out and call out to our children. This was the place where we lived and where we ate and made love amidst emergency vehicles and fraud and the study of legal briefs, among our most sacred texts that had become practically useless to us. They were all on fire anyway. Birds were at one time used as weapons of war. They would be doused with flammable fluid and lit on fire and sent into the enemy's lines. Incendiary birds could change the fate of battles. Everywhere we went, there was this upwelling of the things of the earth. Butterflies, yet the leafing out of the oak, the composition of new forms of music, but also tombstones, defunct tractors, oil tankers run aground, the bellies of salamanders, the windows without glass. We will make do with what we are given, a grammar of what exists, in which grief is a room locked up within the emptiness of the sky. You who come after us will carry the earth on your shoulders, as birds carry the air and are carried. Be lifted by these things that broke us.
My grandmother's house. My grandmother's house was built as a long series of rooms, of which the first, the entry, was almost unfurnished, except for a single rug, a large, thick, soft rug of a deep burgundy color. Although in other memories it is an enormous, multicolored rag rug. Such is the way of memory. On it I used to sit and construct houses of cards out of the poker deck left over from her endless card games. Sometimes I would manage 2 stories, and once I achieved a 3-story structure. Card houses are tricky to build. They are a dare and a risk, and then one card too many or placed without the proper intake of breath, and floof, that house has been swept aside. On the morning after the election, but deep in that morning, the part of the dawn that can become stranded in the dark, I woke in the body of the man elected. He had not invaded me. Instead, I knew I had invaded him. And I lay in a misery of his putrid intestines, and his heart was a rosary of laughing skulls, and his mind was my mind. And I felt his penile rod sagging, and his bladder full, and his wind trapped in a kind of circus that had neither animal nor acrobat. Clowns came and went. Some of them had the unmistakable faces that appear on our paper money. I knew I could no longer sleep, not just that particular morning, but ever again. I knew that dreaming would become one more thing wrapped around cans made out of the metal of the earth and then sold and transported. It became a time when shoes and automatic weapons were offered at special prices with similar sales strategies, but nobody could buy them because everything had stopped. For a time, the streets were empty. The freeways made nothing, and there was an eerie, protracted quiet. We were no longer living in the forgotten times. There was this tremendous pause. Many parts of our memories turned in on themselves. We did not open our doors to strangers. No, we also shut our doors against our friends, and in order to protect them, our families. And it was in the midst of this inhuman quiet, this pausing of the restlessness, that the birds could be heard singing. In those places where the plague festered most seriously, there was not enough room, after a while, in the morgues. There was not enough room in the cemeteries. Bulldozers that were no longer being used to excavate the basements of empty buildings were used to dig mass grave pits on Hart Island. But we had seen and heard the emptiness, the quiet, the nothingness, and it stuck with us. Yes, we had forgotten. No, we could not hold all the memories at once. Yes, we were ourselves mothers, sometimes sons, infants, grandfathers, and in the face of this we were also empty. We were criminals, victims, those who explain things, those who justify things, those who suffer. The playgrounds were not just vacant, they were crisscrossed with police tape. In this great void, there was no forgetting because there was no remembering. There was only the news. And amidst this upwelling of memory, the shattering of silence, the fires came again. The fires that should have surprised no one, yet they came and shocked everyone anyway. Fierce, unforgiving, and swept and charred and melted and incinerated and chewed through forests, houses, apartment complexes, billboards, trucks, swimming pools, the bodies of 2 children who had grown up in a land where memory had become weapon. And out of this arsenal of heat in which people were still sickening and dying of the plague, and in which people were now leaving their houses and protesting, in spite of the danger and because of the danger, and in which extinction had always been primary among the secret weapons, migratory birds began to fall out of the sky, dead by the hundreds of thousands. Do we need to be told the name of this time? We name the fires. We name the hurricanes as they increase in intensity, as they burn and wash away. Forgetfulness. This is about arriving and departing. This is about remembering and forgetting. This is about trying to live in a nervous slice of history.
House of water, house of feathers, house of light. House of water. I could live here, in this place, these walls, this echoing of my voice over the surface of the water, a cistern of impeccable desire. I could live here, in this house. Everything that came before birth would belong, came to be fed, could have their meal, without the need of a separate bowl. The table would become their bowl, kind of messy cleanup, but elegant. I could live here, in this house meant for water. I could live here, in this house of feathers. See how I make my way over the dry earth, over the dead leaves, and what do I return with but a bouquet of feathers, mostly turkey, some hawk, juveniles, and least of all, owl. I could live here, in this house intended for feathers in the arms of a tree quite easily. I could live with the woman who comes to bless the water, who comes to ask forgiveness of the rain, who arrives with skirts that are in the process of becoming water, on my way to becoming a dream, or a hummingbird's ecstatic lilt, or a foxglove on a morning when winter is far away. But I could not live in this house of excrement, in this house of shit. We are not intended to live among our own evidence.
I could live with feathers and with books.
I could live with the avocado and her sister, and the melting of butter, and all the swiftness and ease which dawn makes of night. A great nostalgia of silences and satellites. I could live. Could you not? We could live. I could live in a house made of newspapers. But why would I? Really, it isn't news we are longing for. I could live in a house of light. You could also live, but let's just say it might be a long time. They were permeated, the walls, with a stench of rancid smoke. I have lived in a house of mirrors. As a child, I thought, that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. A house in which we laugh and giggle and forget for a while what is fear. I could live in this house of memory, even though nobody I ever knew or was kin to had such a memory, even if the memories are sad. Perhaps, especially if they are sad, because this is a sad time we live in. And if you are here, moon, star, blanket, gathering the memories with welcoming gestures, I could live in this house where memory is welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Theresa Whitehill, the poet whose words you've just been hearing rendered so beautifully in the heavy lifting film. I always just love Sidney Regelbrugge's reading of the final poem, "The House of Feathers." She was at the time the Mendocino Youth Laureate and was one of our choral crew who recorded the poems. So I'm going to read from the complete collection of work that was developed for heavy lifting. Nevertheless, I have come looking for what I have lost, to give myself a chance, as I said, to visit with my dead for a little while. For a time before she died, my mother was in constant pain. I invite her here, welcome her here. I dress in front of dark windows and do not draw the curtains. I want to be welcome to the night. It is in my catechism, my breeding. When I return from a vigil on the back porch, the electricity has come back on. I go through the cottage, switching off lights. The refrigerator gains back its solemn vibration. Trucks, refrigerated, parked outside the hospitals. Temporary morgues. Overflow, because the dead are more than the morgue can handle. Secretive bulldozing of a burial pit on an island near Manhattan to bury those dead. Helicopters of news reporters. Nevertheless, The elephant ethogram. Against advice, then, the researcher lived her life among the elephants, making common cause with them. She developed a vocabulary, a glossary of the elephant intellect. She found that they are keeping their eyes on us. They gossip about us, even tell jokes. And while they make light of it all, the elephants seem to understand that it is best if we can be avoided. A significant part of their vocabulary is devoted to expressions for articulating where we are in the landscape and where we are likely to go, so that they can go somewhere else. Measuring. Measuring is a way of understanding dependent upon the scale of measurement. Picas, kilos, the symbol pendulum. Listening to dreams is an art, a gift, and is dependent upon the relationships between magicians over the course of several generations. There is a trick to it, of course. It can be learned if you find you have the aptitude. You can apprentice yourself. When what is being measured is larger than a planet, longer than the historical record, what then? And what happens when the essential things to be measured, to be taken in, come in one after another as they have been doing? You can't remain standing at the edge of a firestorm holding up your pica pole while a plague develops over here and time is running out for the white tiger over there. The scale of measurement that could contain all of this hasn't been invented yet. Meanwhile, the body keens up to a certain point and then goes blank. We are learning now what happens when even shock breaks down without delivering us from the wounding. Has speed, then, become the metaphor for what is next? Behind us is the entirety of time that we've been able to gather, a field of imperfect notations. Breath, then, is dependent on automobile exhaust, or had better be. The survival of even the honeybee would seem to be dependent on children still believing in the tooth fairy, or at least war. But while dogs don't talk or care about what's written in books, they do dream. Light is dependent on the sultry stride of a mountain lion through a drought-stricken landscape, pregnant. And the sun that emits that light, these become ancestors to each other. The cat has always been dependent upon the trick of light, and the energy we now know is dependent upon the cat. Courtship, grief, rain. The Irish of my forebears wore their clothes backwards or inside out sometimes on Beltane to ward off the mischief of the fairies. The year my father died, I found myself wearing socks of different colors, having dressed in the dark or in the absent-mindedness of grief. I began to deliberately wear socks of different colors as an homage to this man who used to tell me I wore too much black. A friend told me she noticed that the faces of those who had lost their homes in a firestorm could begin to take on a swollen, discarded look. I wore my clothes inside out sometimes, again, at first carelessly and then deliberately. I put socks on with different colors on each foot, but of the same pattern. I wanted to reckon with this time, with its kaleidoscope, with its chaos. I knew I had to do more than just endure. I had to meet her part way, this grief of mine. Enter her world as a beloved, in courtship, make love to grief. I could apply the lessons of all lovers, making a devoted study of her pleasures and her necessities, those little habits that betray her longings, so that I could be artful with them, so that I could satisfy and more than satisfy her desire. Blue, for the catastrophic wildfires, one after another in a long series of hiccups, belching smoke and flame like any old dragon, I would conquer them with blue. Purple, then, lavender, and softer shades of pink, for the amusement of children who could point to me in the grocery store, shyly whispering to their parents about the lady with the different colored socks. Golden yellow for the planet's seizure, its constriction of species, and for the loss of pure water. Green, a kind of green for the mottled enragement of life I feel sometimes listening to certain cellos on the radio. Peach is the sunrise. Tangerine is the fire-engendered sun. Pale green, sheening to gold, is the trim on the acrobat's suit of lights. Most especially, a bed that has been draped with fresh sheets, scented with sandalwood, on a morning after the rains have returned from their quiet gestation in a decades-long drought. So I'll read the title poem of the film and the artist's book. Heavy lifting. This is the pause that I am flying in, flying hard so as not to fall to earth. Apparently, grief is not a calm, but a huge effort. Letter from a friend. Heavy lifting. It's hard to convey the crisis that happened to us back in the 21st century. The multiple crises, the concatenation of disasters, the wounding, the beginning of the ending of the wounding, the unraveling of all that had come before. That we were already carrying the burden of the dying off of the polar bears and the failing of the glaciers. That was hard enough. But it was when birds began to fall out of the sky, emaciated, desperate, if not already dead, that we realized. We were no longer living in the time of prophecy, no longer in the theory of it all. It was unfolding all around us, one heart stop after another, a chain reaction of seemingly helpless events. We had poisoned the well. And just because we couldn't conceive of it doesn't mean that it didn't happen, just means that we couldn't conceive of it. Because the evidence, there it was. Looking up, the blue heron folded over on itself, heading south in the early sky, and north, crossing paths, a helicopter. From this time, we date a different life. The stories we told our children changed at this time. Our dreams changed. Some of us stopped dreaming. Others registered guns or took part in compromised immune systems. War, then, the background, always. Dreamers and heretics, always. And out of this arose a powerful and dangerous tendency, a hiccup in history, a scratch in the record's fine vinyl grooves that caused it to skip and repeat unerringly. So that while some of us were remembering, were touching our faces to the glass, others were forgetting, or not so much forgetting as to never have taken in those events that were more than the consciousness could bear. We lived in that nervous slice between forgetting and the inevitable. This was the place we were brought to, where we could stand and look out and call out to our children. This was the place where we lived and where we ate and made love, amidst emergency vehicles and fraud and the study of legal briefs, among our most sacred texts that had become practically useless to us. They were all on fire anyway. Birds were at one time used as weapons of war. They would be doused with flammable fluid and lit on fire and sent into the enemy's lines. Incendiary birds could change the fate of battles. Everywhere we went, there was this upwelling of the things of the earth. Butterflies, yes, the leafing out of the oak, the composition of new forms of music, but also tombstones, defunct tractors, oil tankers run aground, the bellies of salamanders, the windows without glass. We will make do with what we are given. A grammar of what exists in which grief is a room locked up within the emptiness of the sky. You, who come after us, will carry the earth on your shoulders as birds carry the air and are carried. Be lifted by these things that broke us.
Thank you, Theresa. I've listened to those poems over and over in the last years, and each time I hear something new, I'm so glad that today you also read Heavy Lifting, which is the first poem in the film in Jim Schoonover's voice. And hearing your voice was just such a treat, and also another perspective on those words. So thank you so much. I will be talking about our collaboration, but it has been very, very special to me. It started with a time when I was had finished a project, The Necropolitics of Extraction. And in the course of, on the heels of that, a enormous oak tree was taken down in the front of my house because it was deemed dead, which it wasn't. It was habitat for everything, and sound, and screening, and light, and it was a very important tree, probably 300 years old, and it went, and I was kind of hurting from that and wanting to bring that into a new project. And you saw me reading, or not reading, but speaking. Can you tell me about that day?
Yeah, it was 2019, and it was a fall, and it was at the Legion of Honor, and there was a symposium, a book art symposium, and you were among the featured speakers, and I was there, having driven down from Mendocino County, and there was some technical glitch with the slideshow that you were planning to present, and I just remember being in this huge auditorium with maybe 150 or more people in, tiered seating up to the top, and I just watched you take in this problem that was going on, and then I watched you make a decision, and you basically decided to just go ahead and talk to us, and sort of set aside the slideshow. And I was so impressed by that. And I went back to my, wrote about that in my journal. And it took me a few months to get up the nerve to send you the poem that I wrote about that occasion. And It is the poem called The Loveliness of Mistakes. And you wrote back to me and said, would you like to collaborate on a project?
Yeah. You nailed me. Somehow I'd never read a poem about myself, for one thing, and it's about you too. But the final verse in particular became a key to heavy lifting. It's the lines that run with the birds flying. The birds represent really my spirit rising. But can you read those few lines? Do you have those?
Yeah. Yeah, just that last stanza.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is, so this partial journey, you might complete it. There's no guarantee. You will map the energy of the gods to the little that you've been able to pin down. And you will be proud of your energy and your love, your energies and your loves, your lovely energy, your proud love, your willingness to mingle in the halls of the dead, bringing the dead treasures that cause their eyes to light up, putting smiles back on faces that have lost flesh. You will speak to birds.
Yeah, and I was just the energy thing is all I am push all the time, moving, pushing forward, and then the smiles on the faces of lost flesh. I've always very much honored my teachers, been compelled to, and to work as a letterpress printer is to work with tools that have been handled by multiple generations going back into the 1900s, 1800s. And there's this feeling of a legacy that one is standing on the shoulders of those who came before. So smiles, just doing the right thing, looking back and also looking forward. So in my work, I very much look forward to with new technologies that have driven the whole world of the book. That's the story of the book over centuries, is what tools we have, how can we use them, how can we make more books, how can we make them faster, how can we make them without paper, which is where we are now. So when I had the chance you wanted to collaborate and we started working together, it was magical.
Yes, Rose asked us some lovely questions about this, and I really appreciated the thought she put into those. And in particular, she wanted to know, like, how did this particular collaboration work? And so I was working on the written part, and you were working on the design of the book and the development of the images of the book and how they would be printed, and eventually printed the entire book. But in the early stages, while the birds became a huge theme throughout my writing, and so when I bounced that poem to you, you came back to me with these images that ended up going on what we call the birds panel. And then the theme of birds wove into the poems later. For instance, in the heavy lifting, there was that moment in the 2020 fires when happened in the middle of a bird migration, and literally thousands of birds, hundreds of thousands of birds, just fell out of the sky dead. And I kept that news article, but I wrote in my journal for months and months, which is my practice. Every morning I would write in what I called my heavy lifting journal. And then I would come to Mendocino, and if poems had come out of that, I would share initial drafts with you. We'd sit in your studio. You would show me the tombstone rubbings you were doing to develop the alphabet that became the lettering on the crisis panel. And we would bounce things back and forth. And then we would go back and work in our separate studios and come back again in 2 or 3 months. And also, we had a lot of email exchanges, bouncing around ideas for the title, what's the theme of the book, and all of that. So it was just like one of the most amazing projects I've ever been involved in, because I finally had met somebody who could go as deep as I could.
And we were in this context of COVID. This is a project of the COVID years. We were not only fielding the media declarations about the horrific impact of COVID, as well as, and more importantly, even the death of George Floyd, the issues of the crazy January 6th uprising at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. I mean, just insane things, none of which have been resolved. But for me, in the face of this barrage, as well as my own crisis of rebuilding, working out of tiny little wooden shed that had been my father's studio, then in a steel shipping container, each of which infected the aesthetic, the look and feel of the book tremendously. And then finally printing the type in the clean new space, which allowed me to do the very careful type letterpress printing of the type, your poetry, so that it can be read very clearly. There's words embedded into the images, but there's also times when you simply can rest with the language and rest with the words and enter the theater of your own mind as a reader, reproducing images and depth of meaning from our language. So I feel like the book was really born of crisis, but we can't forget that COVID still is around us, and it was during the beginning and through it, and the sense of urgency, this urgent publishing that I felt I needed to tap the idea of get the word out. Let's do it now. How fast can we work? How hard can we work to produce something that reflects this experience?
And then it's been really significant that we've been doing the tour during an equally crisis-laden time, in this election year. And
that, again, the poem you read that was in the film with Trump waking in his body. Talk about that.
Oh gosh, so that was my grandmother's house. After the 2016 election, I woke up. Well, what happened was I was writing about making card houses, and in my heavy lifting journal, and suddenly in the writing, the card house fell down, and suddenly a memory came to me. I remembered an experience I had waking up the night after the 2016 election in Trump's body. I was laying in my bed, paralyzed. I couldn't move, and I was in his body. And I had forgotten. How could you forget such an experience? It was, my husband later said that, well, that wasn't a dream. That was like a psychic event. And so that got folded into the poem. And it really, being given the framework to pull all of this stuff, I felt like I'd been given this chance to bring up things that I'd wanted to address for many years in poetry and through poetics, and now was the time. And so it was just tremendously moving and also liberating, that to have found this vehicle.
Because making an artist's book as working as closely together as we did, we sort of collaboration can be linear. One person has produced one aspect, the other the next. As a publisher, I've worked with a lot of writers and philosophers and artists and performance artists, and this is it can be that each person has produced their section, and you come together, and as the bookmaker and designer artist in my field, I would be bringing it together in book form. But sometimes there's a flower bloom, something beautiful happens and things start to emerge from that. And that's what you're describing, this sort of just iterative process where we just rolled forward with one another, rolled together. And iterative is a great word because generative, iterative, printing on the press, multiples. Each one is really unique, especially in this hand printing kind of environment. Less color, more color, less impression, more impression. Whoops, the plate broke down. Oh well, let's just go forward. In the one page of type in the book, the counters, which are the openings, right, in the E and the P and the A, like the donut hole, just disappeared. I mean, the letters lost their donut holes, and I just said, well, here we go. We just going forward and keep on. Each book is unique. Each one reflects the moment and has these suggestions of what can come next. You get a hint of what might happen next. So that's one of the ways that I work. And I hear you talking about your journal, and I wish I had a journal. I really do. Every time you say it, I think, God, I want to get up at 4 a.m. and write my journal. But that's
what I was. Yeah, that's what I was doing this morning. Yeah, and it's very much similar to a piano player doing their scales. Well, I think a lot of people think creative work is all fun and being full in the full flash and that full flood of inspiration. But the fact is, it's as with it's a craft, and you need to play your scales on a regular basis. You need to
your craft.
Printing. You need to be on the press printing. And what I saw in your studio just blew my mind. I've been a letterpress printer also for many years, but never at that level that you have. And seeing the fearlessness with which you would innovate while producing such a complicated project, you getting the laser cutter to cut the wood plates, which you had never worked with before, and then learning how to do it yourself, and then applying it to making the wood plates of many of the images in the book. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, that was a new tool to me. Everything was new because my old studio, which I'd been in for 20 something years, was burned to the ground, and my tools were gone. And I said, but I've been a printer for so many years that I knew exactly what tools I wanted. And I put out a call, and I had the good fortune to buy an entire small shop from a woman who lived near here. Couple of just like completely lucky incidents where I was able to buy the press. You can see behind me here, and some type, and then I just decided that the laser cutter had gotten to the point. So, in a tool for engraving images, also type, but truly images, was now basically there was a consumer grade model that looked like a large scanner, and it didn't take up much room. And really, my new shop is 20 by 18 feet. It's 360 square feet. It is not a large room, so it isn't like I moved into something larger. I moved into here in the last third of my life into something that fits me even like a tighter glove than my last one, which was pretty much like a tight glove. So I'm just, you work to scale of what's available, Also, you're talking about writing every morning and having that raw material to build on. And for me, each project is like that kind of material. If I look back and I see a technique that I thought was working pretty well last time, or maybe I didn't realize that it was working as well as I have to look at my own work or remember the process and go, which things were really turning me on, what was exciting. And so you and I and Zita Borsich, our colleague here in Mendocino, also collaborated during this time on Book Arts Mendocino, a festival that we threw, and we had a show together, each of us with very different. Talk about that. I don't know how our time is doing here.
Well, we wanted to give the people viewing a chance to ask us some questions. So Neil and Rose can let us know if there are any questions lined up. We would love to hear from our audience.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think if you want to continue your conversation for another 5 minutes, we'll put out a call in the comments and check back in.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, so Book Arts Mendocino, or BAM for short, was our way of welcoming Felicia to the Mendocino Coast community after she and her husband Jim were forcibly relocated after the fire. And it was amazing, the turnout. the number of local arts organizations that suddenly realized that they wanted to have their own book arts exhibit. So there must have been
24
venues.
24 venues in January and February, the depth of winter on the Mendocino coast participated.
Yes, and we had a lecture, an online lecture with Peter Koch from Codex in Berkeley, who came on and talked to us about different aspects of the history of the humanities and the book arts. And so it was a really lively time on the coast, and I think it really shook a lot of things loose that are still ongoing on the coast. So that was really gratifying.
Bookstores, libraries, ongoing poetry readings could join our series, could join our events. That what we did was just bring them together in the form of a poster, invited people in every possible way we could to participate, an audience, and we became audience for one another. And it created this sort of wave of interest in the book arts. And that was the intention, that there would be shine a light on this kind of work. And one of the things that was really cool was the show that we had at a gallery here, a collective gallery, Partners Gallery, included the work of your letterpress work, my letterpress work, book work, your broadsides.
My broadsides.
And then Zita's job work, her beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work over many years. Zita was the printer to the stars. In the letterpress community, she was known as the printer to the stars. Here she was. You worked for her for 8 years. You talk about it.
Yeah, I was her production manager by the end of my time there, and we would print on Heidelbergs and do foil stamping and heat embossing, and it was incredibly elegant work that she put out. And it was just such a beautiful juxtaposition, because my letterpress format has never been the codex. I've always done, it's the broadside, it's the single sheet of paper. And the Los Angeles Public Library actually has a few of my pieces from early in my career. And so it was really great to see, and you had some of your sculptural books in the center on this big winding table, and then I had my broadsides around on the wall, and then Zita's letterpress work in the back. And it was just lovely that we had an opportunity to share with our community some of the work we've done over, I've lived in the county for almost 40 years.
And I would just say that when we go out into the world and do these gatherings, we have with us Zita's magazine, the Real Estate magazine. Come for the listings, stay for the stories. And Zita every month puts out a magazine that, yes, features real estate listings. It's a newsprint piece, but it also features articles, a theme for each month that is on something that really matters to the people of the coast. The people read this. This is an important news vehicle or magazine, which it's just really hard to decide what to listen to, So when we go out into a new event, we finally figured out we couldn't put out a stack of these in front because everybody thought they were a real estate rag. In fact, they have this great article about us, but also a great conversation that the three of us have, a colloquium that's published nowhere else. So now finally we figured out to put one on everybody's chair. Then they might pick it up and take it home. And sometimes, we're picking up the extras at the end, but it gets its moment because it has been just another part of the project. We've got the film, we've got the book, we've got the real estate magazine, and we have recording like this one of what we've done and what we've heard from people. So I hope we can go on to hear some questions or ideas in other times.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, there's the companion book, which is available on Felicia's website. I believe the link to her website, movingpartspress.com, is in the chat. And this contains all the background on the project and the full suite of poems that was written.
14 poems. And I just got to cherry pick the stuff I liked. And at the time, I was just so angry and so driven to get something down on paper about these experiences we were all having and I was having. And Theresa's writing House of Water. I could live in a house. I could live. I'm like, no, I don't know about any house I could live in. And she started pointing the way toward a future, just envisioning something, which is, I think, the way the future needs to be made. So maybe some of you have questions or thoughts about any of this.
Yeah, let's check in.
Check in with Rose.
Well, thank you so much. That was an amazing talk and reading, and wonderful to hear from you both. I'm just so impressed by what you accomplished during such a tumultuous time. It's really, really great work. We did have a question about local places to see the book, or also places online. So I thought I'd just start off by saying that the book is part of the Book Arts collection at the Los Angeles Public Library, which is part of Special Collections. That collection contains over 900 items, including artist books, fine press materials, zines, and broadsides, like the ones that Theresa described. And we also have other materials by Theresa and Felicia, including Border Bus from 2019, with poetry by Juan Fleet Herrera, and the book structure by Felicia Rice, and The Natural History of Mill Towns from 1993 by Theresa Whitehill. And information about scheduling an appointment to see any of the items in the Book Arts collection can be found on the Los Angeles Public Library's website under the Digitization and Special Collections Department page. And there's also a link in the chat. And you can also email us directly at specialcollections@lapl.org. So,
That's so great. It's so good that you do that. And I just have to interject that when in the 80s, I started by literary publishing with letterpress. I had the power of the press, and I could print poetry from the community and that I was living in, Santa Cruz, as well as others. And I went to Los Angeles with my books. And I remember the hot afternoon when I walked into the library, Special Collections, that to be allowed, just to be allowed into the back rooms, and bring in my books, which probably are still there. They were just from 1983, 1984, 85, just small, simple books of poetry. I was designing and printing. It's very special.
Yeah, I keep coming across works by Moving Parts Press. It's always really exciting to see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any thoughts about online places aside from the film?
Well, movingpartspress.com has just an incredibly rich collection of documentation of the project, because that's what it is to me. And I've maintained the website for many years, and it is a record, of all that I've done. And I always feel that it's a critical part of publishing. I've thought of the online opportunity, the net, as a broadcast medium. And I realize at this time it is, and it's very legitimate to use it to record video and photographs and things that would be very hard for me, and don't have stacks in a library, anyway, I can use it in that way, documentation. But it's also so much a conversation and about connection now that's a much more legitimate use of it than just, hey, look at me, because you're just simply lost, a drop in the ocean. So, so that's a great place to see photo images of the book, and to pick up the companion book, and to find links to the film, and find out more about each of us, and link, of course, to Theresa's website. So.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning all that. I think that both of those links are in the chat as well.
Great.
So So, Rose, did you have any other questions? I know you had.
I do. Well, yeah, we had uh, an apprentice in the department this summer, and he had a good question that I just thought I'd pass on. He was just curious about the use of the accordion fold structure.
That's, yeah, Felicia, you should talk about that. That's fascinating.
So I started working with the accordion. I call it the accordion. Other people have other names for it, but I started working with it in the 90s when I was working. I've since 1989, I've worked with Chicanx artists, writers on a series, and it was my exclusive focus until the 2019 when I started to publish The Necropolitics of Extraction, which is about extractionism and climate change, and then Heavy Lifting, which is, has a poem of mine. I mean, it's just completely off the rails. But for 30 years, it was what was my editorial focus. And I was working in the 90s with Enrique Chagoya, artist based at Stanford, art professor there, printmaker, painter, and the performance artist and activist Guillermo Gomez Peña. So when we did this book, Codex Hispangliensis, the book structure was an accordion, which dates back to the Mesoamerican codices, of which very few have survived. And Enrique used that as the basis for the book. He gave me 15 what we call mechanical sheets that had collage imagery and a line that he had added. And there was no order to these 15, and I was to string them together. And it was a 30-foot long piece when it was done, but when it folded down, it was 8.5 by 12, basically. So 15 double-page spreads, and finding a sequence, and then just a sheaf of manuscript from Guillermo Gomez Peña, his performance scripts, and how did these two weave together? And that was my first accordion, and I thank Enrique for introducing me to the form, because it is just fantastic for creating a frieze of imagery, just the time element that you have in the book, turning the pages, moving back and forth from front to back. You have this Western codex, you have this time feature. But when you extend the accordion, then you have this opportunity to experience maybe the whole thing or a lot of the thing and move through it physically, like walk along, and it becomes an entirely different performative experience, interactive experience. So I've continued to work in that form. And every time I think, oh, well, there must be something else, I just come back to it because it's so versatile, and it also displays so beautifully. You can really see a lot. You can stand it up. It has a sculptural aspect. But this book is 2 accordions nested into one another that aren't attached. So you can separate them. But when it's all folded up, it's really of a piece. And you saw in the film how you can open it and extend your wings as a bird as you're looking at it. So that's the accordion to me. I just continue working with it. You think, oh, I'm just repeating myself, but no, it's really a learning, investigation. So
Yeah, I use it to great effect. And I also love in Heavy Lifting how I think, I was in how to kind of open the book, but it's like as you're opening it, you're kind of like becoming a bird. And also like the book becomes like a bird as well, with kind of like the beak and the wings extending. And I just thought that was very beautiful.
Yeah, those birds are the birds that I see every day, the ravens, the vultures, and the sparrows that are around me every day. As I was toiling away on the earth, I was looking up into the skies, lifting. It does lift one's spirits to look up, just looking up. Simple things.
It's true. I was wondering what your hopes are for the impact of the book now that it's kind of out in the world.
Theresa, take that one.
Well, when we first thought about going on tour, we realized that we were, this was sort of like, this is what happened to us. This was our experience through these very tumultuous years. And Felicia and I had very different ideas about the dynamics of that. I felt that it was important to pause and to just acknowledge how much was going on. It was like too much, and that we should all be treating ourselves for severe shock, because of all the fires and the COVID, and then the upheaval with the threat of totalitarianism, and George Floyd's death, and the rising up of the Black Lives Matter movement again. And so there was so much interconnected through history, but you couldn't grasp it because things just kept hitting you side of the head. And so my thing was like, I'd like to just pause and acknowledge that we've gone through a lot. And Felicia, you were saying, oh no, I think we have to really grapple with this. We need to move forward. We need to do things. And then we were just curious, like, well, what about our communities? And so what I would really hope is that this work inspire other people to tell their stories, make their own art films about their experience of any episode or all episodes over the last 4 or 5 years. So we were hoping that it would become a tool for communication, because one of the things that's really broken down, I feel, in this country, in this planet, is communication, compassionate listening and expression. And so that we just wanted to weigh in on the side of inclusivity and articulation, and hearing people out, hearing each other out.
Witness
Witnessing.
all that we were seeing. So there's a response. Isn't that, like, as I read at the beginning, the artists responding to what's around. I said, as a printer, my job is to confront complex issues and render my response to them in book form. As an artist, my job is to do so with profound integrity. As a publisher, my job is to make these issues public. So this is the work, right? As a book artist, yes, responding to what I perceive. Printer, resolving it on the page somehow or in another form, and then making public. And I do feel that in the artist book world, there could be more attention to the responsibility we have as publishers when we take up the book form. It is an age-old form for communication, as Theresa says, for sharing information, for speaking out, and for listening. And on our tour, the people who have come we've often seated the audience with poets, and they'll read their poetry as well as Theresa reading her poetry. And then someone will take a moment to tell a story or something of their own, and you get the tone or the tenor of a community. Just a snapshot that very day, but also sort of maybe something about conversations that have been going on in that town, a little different than anywhere else. When we were in Lower Lake, which is a small community on this incredible lake in Lake County called Clear Lake, huge lake, like you'd think you were in Switzerland. You can drive around it forever. And unfortunately, it was poisoned horrifically by the mining that went on there in the 19th and into the 20th centuries, and has a horrific history of tragedy and around the indigenous peoples there. But that day that we were there was an August day, a year ago August, and it was blazing hot. That county has burned over and over again. And we were in the third floor of an old schoolhouse built in 1887, and the whole room was just, we were all just on tenterhooks, like, what's coming next? What? And there, through that sharing, just of a sense of this enduring, enduring and bracing oneself. At least sharing that, that others are with you, and that's critical. And
Yeah, I remember when we were in Felton, similar, conversation about the fires, and I had a sense there was one young woman who was her husband is a firefighter, and she is a paramedic, I believe. And what she said was the way that we presented the information about fires, for her as someone who survived the fire herself, made it easier for her to deal with the subject matter. This presentation as art and as craft and as poetry. And it was really gratifying to hear that, because she said it's really like the only other alternative we had was the newscasts, and they're just so focused on the absolute disaster, the kind of the horrificness of it, but not anything about how it affects our psyches and how it affects our children. And I also heard at that reading, there were people speaking from different parts of the community, and some of them had never met each other before. And there was a woman who had, they were living on opposite ridges, and they each told their fire stories. And one woman had lost her house, and the other woman had survivor's guilt because her house survived the fire. And they were like hearing each other's stories for the first time. That was, to me, it was like, okay, we can go home. This communication happened. We came to this community, we brought this thing, these people came, and these two people spoke to each other who had never heard each other speak before. Mm-hmm. That's what I hope for. Yeah. More of that.
Yeah.
And I think that the form of going out on tour, a listening tour, which I wish, our current president had done immediately, sent his Vice President Kamala Harris out on a listening tour in 2020 to all communities all over the country and let people say their piece, because there's so much frustration in this country about not being heard. Let people be heard, for God's sake. So I've lost my train of thought because I'm thinking about this horrible election. Oh, yeah, the form of going out and talking, bringing something to town, the chautauqua, the snake oil. Somebody comes to town and shares something different, and people gather, and it's a new constellation, a new opportunity to hear people in different ways. And I would hope that this form others will realize how accessible it is. I mean, mm-hmm. I got on the phone, I got on email, I contacted library community rooms, community theaters. We used our network within the book arts community for 2-3 of our events, but Theresa's Poetry Network was critical to a number of our presentations, including the Poetry Festival in Seattle. But whatever network you have, whatever you want to build, there's a lot of receptivity to showing up and doing something that can create new communities, new conversations, and new ideas, which is where this really needs to point, is to imagining a future worth living. What do we want? No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it was, it's kind of a stroke of genius, not just to create the work, but also to take it out into different communities and, to listen and to talk.
Mm-hmm. The woman that Theresa was talking about, who's a firefighter, her husband, I thought he was the captain of the fire district or fire department in Felton, and she said he had been on almost every fire since 2008. That's when Theresa Wright lists the fires in Northern California since 2008, and he had been on almost every one. Mm-hmm. So, and she herself also, and many of these. So where do our first responders go with their feelings? With their responses? It's nonstop crisis, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, a lot of them are leaving the profession. It's just,
Mhm. Yeah.
Would you like to say a few last words, maybe to sum up, or maybe to talk about future projects or maybe
Theresa.
future collaborations?
Theresa, where are you going next?
Well, after Chico, our last stop on the tour, I'm not. I won't be traveling for a little while, but I'm publishing a couple of smaller works of work that I developed over the past year and a half, 2 years. And so I'm working with a publisher up in Washington State, and continuing work. I do work with the Cascadia Poetics Lab, which is how we got connected up with Seattle. And I'm helping them output a whole anthology of work that's based in Cascadia, which is that area defined by watersheds rather than by government political boundaries. So it's a book of essays on eco-politics and Zen and the land. So it's a dear theme of mine is poetics, the poetry of the land.
And this is so fascinating because this bioregion, this huge defined by watersheds, the Cascadia, the very southern tip is here in Mendocino County.
It reaches all the way down to Willits. Yeah.
To Willits, which is just north of Mendocino. So a lot of my work with the Chicanx art movement has been about border politics and the border culture. And so in a way, here I am on this border again, looking at this huge region that which way do the rivers flow? My understanding is the rivers flow north of here, and south of here they flow south. So even Big River here in Mendocino, our river is flowing south now. It's not flowing, and it's right here that we're on the edge of the fault, the earthquake fault, the tectonics, the plate. We're on the edge of the plate. So fascinating. And then for myself, for Moving Parts Press, I continue working with a broadside series that I've been doing for about 5 years called Latinx, Chicanx Poetics, queer poets from around the country in Puerto Rico. And there'll be 15 broadsides in that series. And it's finishing up. We're finishing up at the end of the year. And then I'm doing another book in the it's Khalifa's series of digitally printed photographic accordion fold books of Chicana at this point for this new book, artists' work, which is very, very gratifying, really cool, beautiful, beautiful small books that you can pick up and take home. Whereas heavy lifting at 11 by 17 inches, weighing so many pounds, it's not something you can just take home, and is frightfully expensive. So, and then I have a new smaller book project to take to the Codex Book Fair, which is where we all convene in Oakland. Every 2 years, you can go to that fair. And there are book arts fairs and artist book fairs in almost every major city in the globe, I think, at this point. Some beautiful, exciting opportunities to see the zines and maybe you can, Rose, say what you saw when you were at the Codex Fair.
Oh, so much. Yeah, it's just massive. Yeah. But yeah.
People are really exploring the form of the book. And using all kinds of techniques I just happen to be a relief letterpress printer who went to relief image making, but people are using all kinds of tools to produce, and papers. And I'm working on actually making printing inks using mushroom pigments. This is something that grows out of my mom's work with mushroom dyes, and she always wanted me to make make printing inks using mushroom pigments, and so I'm going to start doing that just tomorrow. I'm setting up the lab outside. I have two colleagues, and we're starting to do that. So
it sounds amazing.
It's going to be fun.
It's a great fall activity. Yeah, all those projects sound great. I'll definitely keep an eye out.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. I was a wonderful program. I really appreciate you joining us. And yeah, and thanks to everyone who could join on YouTube as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are, again, we're just so excited to have this tour documented. I mean, here we are talking about it. Toward the end, we can look back. We have a long view, and it's just been great to know that some of our experiences are recorded for others to see.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.